Poor woman begged for work. "Cowboy," said Darlin, "only position left is wife." The dust of Sandstone Gulch was a shroud, a place of raw desperation, simmering defiance, and a deep, unspoken dread. Anna's knuckles were raw, but she raised her fist again. The heavy oak door of the stone ranch remained shut, a silent monument to the man feared throughout the territory. She wasn't begging for herself. The image of her brother's fever-bright eyes, his shallow breaths, was a brand on her soul. He was the reason she stood here ready to face the devil himself, for a chance at survival. Knocking on Jacob Stone's door was a long shot, a fool's errand. They said he was a ghost haunted by a past he'd buried with his wife. Suddenly, the door groaned open. A silhouette blocked the light, tall and unyielding. "I need work, mister," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Any work." His voice was stone ground on stone. "There's no work here for a hired hand." He paused, his gaze pinning her to the spot. "The only position available is as my wife." The words hung in the scorched air between them, too heavy to grasp, too sharp to ignore. "The only position available is as my wife." Anna's breath caught a tiny ragged thing in the vast, hostile silence. The sun beat down on her thin shawl, but a chill colder than any winter had seized her. For a moment, raw fury warred with her desperation. He was mocking her, this stone-faced recluse, enjoying the power he held over the dirt-smudged woman on his doorstep. But when she forced herself to meet his eyes the color of a stormy sky, she saw no cruelty. She saw only a devastating emptiness. A man already at the bottom of his own grave. The image of her brother Thomas flashed in her mind. His cough a dry rustle of leaves. His skin too pale. The town doctor had given him a week without proper medicine and food. This was not a choice. It was a sentence. "All right," she heard herself say, the words scraped raw from her throat. It was the sound of a gate slamming shut on the life she had known. Jacob Stone did not smile. He didn't react at all, merely gave a slow final nod as if confirming a grim transaction. "Get your things," he said, his voice a low gravel. "There's a preacher in town who asks few questions." The journey to Sandstone Gulch was a silent torment. Anna sat beside him on the wagon bench, her hands clenched in her lap, the vast, unforgiving landscape a mirror of her own desolate future. He handled the horses with a quiet, efficient grace. His knuckles scarred his profile, carved from the very rock and hardship that defined this land. He did not speak. He did not look at her. She was cargo, a piece of a puzzle she couldn't yet see. In town, the justice of the peace, a harried man with ink stains on his cuffs, looked from Jed's grim face to Anna's pale one and simply sighed, stamping the document without a word. As they stepped back onto the dusty boardwalk, a woman's voice, smooth as silk and sharp as glass, cut through the afternoon haze. "Jacob, I heard you were in town. I was just about to ride out to see if you needed anything." A woman emerged from the mercantile, elegant even in the dust. Her riding dress was the color of dark wine, her hair a perfect black coil at her neck. Her beauty was startling, but her smile did not reach her eyes as she looked at Anna. Those eyes, cold and assessing, stripped Anna bare in a single glance. "And who is this?" "Little Dove," the woman purred. Jed stepped slightly, a subtle, almost unconscious movement that placed him between her and Anna. "This is Anna," he said, his voice flat. "My wife." The woman's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something predatory, something possessive flashed in her gaze before being veiled again. "Wife?" She laughed, a sound like tiny bells of ice. "Oh, Jacob, you always were one for surprises. I am Seraphina Vance. We are neighbors." She extended a gloved hand to Anna, her touch impossibly cool. "Welcome to Sandstone Gulch, my dear. I do hope you know what you've gotten yourself into." The words were a welcome, but they felt like a threat. The ceremony was over. In minutes, the preacher's words a meaningless drone. Then they were back on the wagon, riding toward a home that was not a home. As the sun bled across the horizon, they arrived at the ranch house. It was large and dark against the bruised sky, a place of shadows. Inside it was impossibly clean, yet utterly lifeless. No pictures on the walls, no books on the shelves. A place scrubbed clean of any memory of any joy. It smelled of lye soap and old settled dust. Jed lit a single lamp, the light casting long dancing shadows. He turned to her, his face half hidden in the gloom. "Your room is upstairs." The first on the left, he stated, not asked. "You will cook, you will clean. You will not ask questions." He walked her through the main floor, his voice low and devoid of emotion, as he laid out the geography of her new prison. He pointed to a heavy oak door at the end of the main hall, a door that seemed darker than all the others. "Every room in this house is yours to manage," he said, his stormy eyes locking on to hers, the first flicker of a dangerous raw emotion showing through the cracks. "Except this one." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the dread build. "This room was my wife's. You will not touch this door. You will not look at it. You will never, ever try to open it." "Do you understand?" Anna could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. He left her then, disappearing into the shadows of the house, leaving her alone with the flickering lamp, the suffocating silence, and the chilling certainty that the lock on that forbidden door was not the only one in this house. She had traded starvation for a gilded cage, and a terrible feeling began to dawn in her soul. The ghost of the woman who came before her was still here, and she was not alone. Dawn broke not with a gentle blush, but with a blade of silver light that sliced across the plains, offering no warmth. The silence of the house was the first thing Anna noticed. It was a physical presence, a weight that pressed in on her heavy with unspoken grief and the ghosts of yesterday. This was her new life, a life measured in the spaces between heartbeats. She rose and began her work. The house, she discovered, was a monument to neglect disguised as order. The floors were swept, but a fine layer of dust coated the tops of the cupboards. The pantry was sparse, filled with the bare necessities for a man who ate to live, but found no pleasure in it. It was a place where a soul had simply given up. Her first act of defiance was small. Behind the barn choked by weeds, she found what was once a magnificent rose garden. Brown, withered canes reached out like skeletal fingers. It had been loved once, deeply. Armed with a rusty trowel and a stubborn hope, she began to clear the weeds. She would bring something back to life in this house of echoes, even if it was only a single flower. Weeks bled into a silent routine. She would cook meals he would eat without comment. He would leave before sunrise and return after sunset, smelling of horses and the vast lonely prairie. They were two strangers orbiting each other in a universe of silence, the forbidden door at the end of the hall, the dead star, everything revolved around. Yet there were moments. She would come out to find a bucket of fresh water sitting by her struggling rose bushes, a silent offering he never acknowledged. Once she saw him from the window, his hand resting gently on the muzzle of his horse, his expression softening into something vulnerable, something human, before the mask of stone slammed back into place. These small cracks in his armor gave her a strange, dangerous hope. The war began on a Tuesday. Jed was out on the range mending a distant fence line. Anna was tending to her garden, a single defiant rosebud now visible, when the sound of a carriage announced a visitor. Seraphina Vance descended like a queen dressed in a striking blue that shamed the pale, washed-out sky. "My dear Anna," she cooed, her smile a perfect predatory curve. "I brought you a pie. A house isn't a home without the smell of cinnamon, don't you think?" She swept into the kitchen, her eyes cataloging everything, The worn-out dish towels, the simple stew Anna was preparing the determined set of Anna's jaw. Serafina placed the pie on the table, a Trojan horse in a pastry crust. Poor Jacob. She sighed, trailing a gloved finger along the dusty windowsill. He tries so hard, but this house, it died with Alara, you know. She was the life of it. Her laughter used to fill these rooms. She paused, letting the words sink in a subtle poison. It must be so difficult trying to fill such elegant shoes. Anna's hands tightened on the wooden spoon she was holding. I'm not trying to fill anyone's shoes, Mrs. Vance. Of course not, Serafina said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You're a practical girl. I can see that. Which is why I'm sure you understand Jacob's delicate situation. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The debts are quite substantial. I've been helping him, of course, as a friend. It would be a tragedy if he lost this land. It's all he has left of her. The implication was clear. I own him. You are merely a temporary inconvenience. Anna stood her ground, her voice even. My husband and I will manage just fine. The word husband seemed to strike Serafina like a whip. The mask of civility cracked, revealing the cold fury beneath. She took a step back, her eyes sweeping over Anna with utter contempt. She was no longer speaking to a woman, but to an insect she was considering crushing. You're brave, Serafina said, the words clipped and cold. I'll grant you that. She walked to the door, pausing on the threshold for her final devastating strike. She turned her beautiful face a mask of chilling pity. But this land has a way of swallowing women who don't belong, dear. It's a hard, unforgiving place. She smiled, then a flash of white teeth. Alara learned that the hard way. The screen door clicked shut behind her, leaving Anna alone in the sudden deafening silence. The scent of cinnamon from the pie filled the air, thick and cloying like the perfume on a corpse. The threat was no longer veiled. It was a declaration. Anna looked toward the end of the hall at the dark, silent door. She finally understood. The real ghost in this house wasn't the one locked behind it. It was the one who had just walked out the front door. Serafina's parting words lingered in the air long after she was gone, a venom that seeped into the very floorboards of the house. Alara learned that the hard way. It was a promise. Anna took the pie, its sweet cinnamon scent now a mockery, and walked it out to the edge of the property, leaving it for the coyotes. She would not let that woman's poison into her home. The house no longer felt just empty. It felt watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the eaves seemed to carry a warning. The forbidden door at the end of the hall took on a new, more urgent meaning. It was no longer just a memorial to Jed's grief. It was the beginning of a story that Anna was now terrifyingly a part of. To survive Serafina, she had to understand what happened to Alara. Her quest for answers began not with a key, but with a trowel. She poured her fear and frustration into the parched earth of the abandoned rose garden. The thorns tore at her hands. The sun beat on her back, but with every weed she pulled, every inch of soil she turned, she felt a strange, fierce connection to the woman who had planted these roses. This garden had been Alara's sanctuary, a place of beauty in a hard land, a place worth fighting for. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of bruised purple, she felt his eyes on her. She glanced up and saw Jed standing on the porch, a dark silhouette against the lamplight of the house. He was watching her, his usual mask of indifference gone, replaced by an expression she couldn't decipher, a mix of pain, memory, and something else, something that looked almost like gratitude. The moment their eyes met, he turned and vanished back into the shadows of the house. He had seen her. He had seen what she was trying to do. It was enough. The next day, driven by a new resolve, she decided to thoroughly clean a small forgotten sitting room at the back of the house, a room that felt distinctly feminine. Dust lay thick as a blanket on a roll-top desk and a velvet chaise lounge. As she struggled to move a heavy oak bookshelf to clean behind it, one of its legs caught on a floorboard. It was loose. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Kneeling, her fingers trembling, she pried the board up. There, nestled in the dark hollow space below, was a small leather-bound box. It was a lady's keepsake box, its silver lock tarnished with age. It was locked. A frantic search of the desk drawers revealed a small ornate key. It slid into the lock. It turned. The box contained not jewels, but a life. Ilara's life. Pressed flowers, a ribbon, and a slim leather-bound diary. Anna's hand shook as she opened it. The handwriting was elegant, alive. October 5th. Jacob brought me a cutting from the wild roses on the mesa. He is a man of few words, but his heart speaks in these small, quiet ways. This land is hard, but with him it is home. Anna read for hours as the sun set the words, painting a portrait of a woman full of life and love. Then the tone began to change. November 12th. Serafina Vance visited again today. She calls herself my friend, but her eyes are like a hawk's, always measuring, always wanting. She covets this ranch. She speaks of combining our properties, of the power we could have. She does not speak of partnership. She speaks of consumption. I call her the Velvet Viper. The final entries were frantic, the elegant script becoming a panicked scrawl. Ilara wrote of discovering how Serafina was using forged documents to steal water rights from smaller homesteads, bleeding them dry before buying their land for pennies. She suspected Serafina's cruelty knew no bounds. Anna flipped to the last page, to the final chilling entry written in a shaky hand the day before Ilara died. She knows I have found her out. I feel her eyes on me even when she's not here. I fear she will not let me stand in her way. But I am not afraid. I have the proof now, the forged deed from the Miller homestead and a sworn letter from the boy she paid to witness it. She will not take this land from us. She would never think to look for it. Anna held her breath, her eyes scanning the last line, a final desperate message from the grave. The proof is safe, where only a true lady of this house would find it, at the heart of the thorns. Anna's gaze shot to the window, to the dark skeletal outlines of the rose garden against the moonlit sky. The secret wasn't in this house of ghosts. It had been outside all along, buried in the one place Anna had chosen to bring back to life. The moon was a sliver of bone in the black sky. A cold wind whispered through the skeletal branches of the rose bushes, carrying the scent of dust and coming rain. Anna moved through the garden, a ghost in a borrowed nightgown, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, at the heart of the thorns. The words from the diary were a map, a prayer, a final desperate plea from one woman to another across the vale of death. She found it at the center of the garden, the oldest rose its trunk, thick and gnarled, like the hand of an old woman. It was the one Jacob had brought Ilara as a cutting the heart, from which all the other beauty had grown. Anna fell to her knees, ignoring the thorns that snagged her dress and pricked her skin, and began to dig. The earth was dry and hard-packed. She clawed at it with her bare hands, dirt packing under her nails, the frantic energy of a trapped animal fueling her. Deeper, deeper. Minutes stretched into a cold eternity. Hope began to curdle into despair. Then her fingers struck something hard. Metal. With a final choked sob of effort, she pulled it free, a small tin box, heavy and cold, wrapped tightly in oilskin to protect it from the damp. She had it. She had Ilara's proof. It was then she heard it. The slow, tired hoofbeats of a single horse. Jed was home. Panic seized her. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the box to her chest, and ran, a wild-eyed creature of the night, back to the suffocating silence of the house. She hid the box beneath a loose board in her own room before stumbling into the kitchen, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her hands and the hem of her nightgown caked in fresh dirt. He was standing there by the cold hearth, his shadow long and menacing in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. He didn't have to light a lamp. He could see her. He could see the evidence of her trespass written all over her. "What have you done?" His voice was not a yell. It was something far worse. A low, broken whisper heavy with the agony of a wound torn open. He knew where she had been. The time for fear was over. Anna walked to the table that stood between them, a silent battlefield, and placed Alara's diary upon it. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, clear, and held the weight of a final judgment. "I did what you were too afraid to do," she said. "I listened to your wife. The dam broke. The stone man crumbled." Jed let out a strangled cry and sank into a chair, his face in his hands. The confession, when it came, was a torrent, a flood of guilt and grief held back for a year of silent torment. I knew he choked out the words ripped from his soul. I suspected her. Serafina. She was always circling like a vulture. After the accident, she was the first one here full of sympathy and offers to buy the land. But I had no proof. Nothing. Just a gut feeling that was eating me alive. He looked up at her, his stormy eyes swimming with unshed tears. The guilt, Anna. I should have protected her. I should have seen it coming. It broke me. I let the ranch go to ruin. I let myself go to ruin. I couldn't even stand to look at her roses. His voice dropped, filled with a raw shame. And then you came. You were so alive. And you looked at me with those determined eyes. Marrying you. It was a madness. A desperate, selfish act. I thought if you were my wife, Serafina would have to stay away. That I could protect you in a way I couldn't protect Alara. But all I did was drag you into her grave with me. Anna's anger, her fear it all dissolved, washed away by a wave of profound, aching empathy for this broken man. She retrieved the tin box from her room and placed it on the table beside the diary. "You didn't drag me into a grave, Jed," she whispered, prying open the lid. "You gave me a reason to fight." Inside lay a folded yellowed deed and a single sheet of paper, Alara's proof. The land title forged with a clumsy copy of a homesteader's signature, and the sworn signed confession of the young clerk Serafina had paid to witness it, detailing the date, the amount, and the threats she had used. It was all there, a snake finally defanged. For the first time, Jed looked at Anna and truly saw her. Not as a replacement, not as a burden, but as an ally, a partner. A flicker of something new and fragile passed between them in the lamplit silence, the beginning of trust. The moment was shattered by a sound from outside. A low, panicked bellow from the cattle, followed by the sharp crack of splintering wood. They rushed to the door. In the weak light of the rising dawn, they saw it. A long section of the north fence was smashed to pieces, and a dozen of their best cattle were gone, their tracks heading directly toward the vast open lands of Serafina Vance. The war was no longer about ghosts and whispers. It had just become brutally, terrifyingly real. The rising sun cast a bloody light over the broken fence and the tracks leading toward Serafina's land. It wasn't a theft. It was an invitation, a summons to an execution. Jed stood beside Anna, his face a mask of cold, hard fury. The haunted broken man was gone, replaced by a warrior. "It's a trap," he said, his voice a low rumble. "She wants me to follow the tracks. She'll have men waiting in the canyons ready to swear they caught me rustling her cattle." He looked at Anna, his gaze intense. "She'll have the sheriff with her, a neutral party to witness my crime. She means to see me hang by noon." A terrifying, desperate plan formed between them in the cold morning air, spoken in clipped whispers. A plan with no room for error. "You'll give her the fight she wants." Anna set her own voice tight with a fear she refused to show. "Draw them into the canyons. Keep them busy. I'll go the other way. I'll get the proof to the sheriff." Anna, no, he started a raw fear for her in his eyes. It's too dangerous. Her ranch is a fortress. It's the only way, she insisted, pressing the oilskin-wrapped package into his hand. Give this to me when you ride out. If they catch me, they'll find nothing. She looked him in the eye, her small hand covering his on the package. I am not the woman who walked onto your porch a month ago, Jed. I am not afraid of her. He looked at her for a long moment, a universe of unspoken words passing between them. He finally gave a single sharp nod. He saddled his horse, a grim soldier marching toward a battle he did not expect to survive. As he mounted, he leaned down and passed her the oilskin package. Their fingers brushed. It was a promise, a farewell. Then he spurred his horse and rode toward the canyons, a solitary figure against the vast, hostile land. He was the diversion. She was the weapon. Minutes later, the first distant crack of a rifle shot echoed through the valley. The trap had been sprung. Anna's heart leaped into her throat, but she forced her legs to move. She ran low and fast, using the cover of the rolling hills to circle toward the Vance estate. The manor was a monument of arrogance in the middle of the prairie, its white pillars and sprawling verandas a stark violation of the natural landscape. It was a viper's nest. She crept through the manicured gardens, the scent of imported flowers a sickening contrast to the smell of gunpowder on the wind. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, lazy and confident. She waited, her breath held until they passed, then slipped through a gap in a hedge, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She made it to the back of the house, her eyes scanning for an entry. A window left carelessly ajar in the pantry. Inside, the house was silent and opulent. Silk wallpaper and polished floors. The distant sound of voices drew her toward a set of large, ornate doors. The study. She could hear Seraphina's musical laugh and the deeper, gruffer tones of Sheriff Miller. She clutched the precious package, her hand slick with sweat. She had to get to him. She took a single, steadying breath and stepped out of the shadows. I believe you dropped this. Seraphina was standing at the end of the hall as if she had been waiting. She held a single, perfect white rose cut from one of Alara's bushes. Her smile was one of pure, triumphant evil. You, Seraphina breathed, her voice a low hiss of satisfaction. The little mouse come to play in the lion's den. Did you really think it would be that easy? The distant gunshots echoed again, a soundtrack to Anna's capture. That is the sound of your husband's future turning to dust. He will be dead or in chains by the hour. She advanced on Anna, her eyes burning with a cold, victorious fire. I will give you one chance. Give me what you are holding. Walk away from here, and I will let you live. A testament to my generosity. Anna clutched the package tighter. She saw Alara's face in her mind, heard Jed's confession. She would not run. You're a murderer and a thief, Anna said, her voice shaking but clear. And your reign is over. Seraphina's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. The pretense was over. You foolish, worthless little stray, she shrieked, lunging forward. You will die here, and they will find your body next to your rustler husband's. She grabbed for the package, her nails digging into Anna's arm. They struggled a desperate, silent battle in the grand, empty hall. Seraphina was stronger, fueled by rage. She ripped the package from Anna's grasp. It was over. She had failed. Guards, Seraphina screamed victory in her voice. But Anna had one last desperate card to play. Sheriff Miller, she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. Ask her, ask Seraphina, Vance, about the Miller homestead deed. The study door flew open. Sheriff Miller stood on the threshold, his hand on his gun, his face a storm of confusion and dawning suspicion. Seraphina froze, her triumphant expression turning to one of pure, murderous fury. At that exact moment, another sound ripped through the air, not a distant echo, but the deafening roar of a shotgun fired from just outside the front of the house. The great stained glass window above the main door exploded inward, showering them all in a kaleidoscope of glittering, deadly shards. For a single silent heartbeat, the world was made of glittering glass. Shards of the shattered window rained down around them, a beautiful and deadly storm. Through the jagged opening, a figure appeared, wreathed in smoke and righteous fury. Jed. He was bruised, his shirt torn, but he was alive, and the shotgun he held was leveled directly at Seraphina's heart. The standoff was absolute, a tableau of hatred and hope frozen in the sunlit, glittering dust. In that frozen moment, Anna acted. With a cry that was half sob, half battle cry, she threw the oilskin package. It skidded across the polished floor and landed at Sheriff Miller's feet. "The proof is in there. Sheriff," she gasped, her voice ringing with the hard-won clarity of truth. "The Miller homestead deed. A signed confession. It's all there." Sheriff Miller, a man caught between a powerful landowner and a desperate woman, looked from Seraphina's furious face to the damning package on the floor. The distant gunshots had stopped. The only sounds were their ragged breaths and the faint musical tinkle of the last shards of glass falling from the window frame. He made his choice. He knelt, his movements stiff, and picked up the package. "Don't you dare," Seraphina hissed, her voice a low, venomous threat. "That is the word of a lying stray against a pillar of this community." But the sheriff was already reading, his face growing darker, harder with every line. He saw the forgery. He read the clerk's terrified, detailed confession. The truth, stark and ugly, was undeniable. The pillar of the community was rotten to the core. Seeing the game was lost, Seraphina let out a snarl of pure, animalistic rage. She was not a woman who accepted defeat. From the folds of her elegant dress, she produced a small silver derringer, aiming it not at Jed, but at the unarmed Anna. The world moved in slow motion. The glint of the silver gun, the cold triumph in Seraphina's eyes. The shotgun in Jed's hands roared. The blast did not hit Seraphina, but the heavy mahogany table beside her, which exploded into a shower of splinters. The derringer flew from her suddenly numb hand, clattering uselessly across the floor. She stared at Jed, her face a mask of disbelief and impotent fury. Her power, the only thing she had ever truly loved, was gone. Seraphina Vance, the sheriff, said, his voice cold as a grave. "You are under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy to commit the murder of Alara Stone." Her guards, seeing their queen dethroned, dropped their weapons. As the sheriff led a struggling, screaming Seraphina away, her beautiful face was twisted into an ugly mask of hate. She was no longer a viper. She was just a cornered, pathetic snake. The silence she left behind was profound. A cleansing peace. Jed lowered the shotgun, the strength seeming to flow out of him. He stumbled toward Anna, his eyes searching her face, his hands reaching for her as if to make sure she was real. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperate, trembling strength. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, gunpowder dust, and home. They did not need words. They had survived. Weeks later, a new season settled over the Stone Ranch. A season of healing. Anna's brother Thomas was recovering his laughter, a sound the old house had never known. The fences were mended. The cattle were home. The rose garden under Anna's patient care had exploded into a riot of crimson and white blossoms, a defiant testament to life's refusal to be buried. The house no longer felt like a tomb. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced with life, not decay. The forbidden door at the end of the hall now stood open. It was a simple, quiet study filled with books on agriculture and geology. The shrine to grief had finally become a room of purpose. One evening, as the sun set, casting long, peaceful shadows, Jed and Anna stood on the porch watching the colors bleed across the sky. The silence between them was no longer a chasm of unspoken pain, but a comfortable shared space. He turned to her, taking her small, calloused hands in his own. His stormy eyes were clear now, the ghosts finally laid to rest. Anna, he began, his voice low and rough with an emotion he was still learning to name. When I made you that offer, that first day, I was a dead man. I thought I was offering you a cage, a way to protect you. He looked out at the land, at the blooming roses, at the life she had brought back, not just to the ranch, but to him. But you, he whispered, turning back to her, his gaze full of a profound, quiet awe. You didn't see a cage. You saw a home. And you fought for it. You fought for me. He raised her hand to his lips, his touch gentle. The position of wife is still open, he said, a faint, real smile touching his lips for the first time. If you'll have it, not as a bargain, not as a shield, but as my partner, my friend. He paused, his heart in his eyes. My everything. Anna's answer was not a word, but the tears of joy that slipped down her cheeks as she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. They stood together as the first stars appeared, two survivors who had found not just a sanctuary, but a future in the very heart of the storm.